Uh-oh, time to get your pathetic man-child with Legos dunks on movie made to inspire little girls comments ready. I know I do. Well, hello! Welcome to Storytime, my depressing internet show where someday we'll talk about things that aren't terrible and painful. But speaking of terrible and painful, in this episode we'll be talking all about Captain Marvel, the final entry in MCU before Avengers concludes the Infinity Saga. But more importantly, it's the first Marvel movie to feature a lady superhero in a leading role, and all it took was 11 years and 20 feature films. Better watch out, Iron Man, the future's looking pretty female. Like all movies in MCU, Captain Marvel is a lazy, undercooked mess featuring a script that doesn't make any sense. But unlike most movies in MCU, Captain Marvel does want very badly to be about something important, in this case, empowering girls, which is great. Unfortunately, it fails at that aspiration, dragging the rest of the movie down with it. But hey, if we've learned nothing else about comic book movies, it's that it's the thought that counts, not what actually happens on screen. Headcanon is far more important than the actual text.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
I'll be both spoiling the slop that passes for the movie's plot and daring to question the efficacy of its Disney Corporation-approved feminism. So if you'd rather not be here for that, this is your time to leave.
You can, of course, leave at any time you wish and spare yourself my ramblings, though I have to admit, having an ear to bend makes a welcome respite from...
Captain Marvel is a 2019 film directed by Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden, the first lady director of a Marvel movie. To be fair, Uncle Kevy really did want to hire a lady director earlier, but there just weren't any Marvel movies about lady heroes, so we couldn't. Feminism, of course, meaning that lady directors can only make movies about lady heroes. Hey, I don't make the rules. Marvel loves women. Anyway, Anna and Ryan also directed some other stuff before this that neither you nor I have seen, but I'm sure there was a reason they got the job that wasn't just because they were available and cheaper than Catherine Bigelow. The movie was written by...
I am not a committee!
All of these people. But look how many ladies there are. One of them wrote Tomb Raider, one of them worked on Guardians of the Galaxy before getting, shall we say, swept aside by James Gunn, and one of them wrote Inside Out. And two of those are real movies, so surely with this much writing talent, the story in this movie will be a story, right?
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you?
Let's quickly outline that alleged story before we get into the characters. Basically, it's all about Veers, aka Carol Danvers, aka Avenger, an Earth American Air Force pilot who gets kidnapped by Krees after absorbing photon powers in an explosion in which she loses her memory and critical thinking skills. She spends the next 6 years helping the Krees fight a genocidal war against the hated Skrulls, till she gets stranded on Earth and goes on a buddy trip with Samuel L. Jackson and learns that genocide is bad and that the Krees were manipulating her the whole time. Jock. As always, we've got some characters. Veers / Carol Danvers / Captain Avenger. Like I just said, Carol is an Air Force pilot who gets photon powers and is kidnapped and manipulated by the Kree. The reasons for this are a little hazy and have to do with using her photon powers to make a light speed engine or something. More on this later. Basically, Carol's main question has to do with who she is and learning the truth about her past.
Who am I? What am I?
And also learning that when you discover you have godlike powers, it means you don't have to answer to anyone and everything you do is correct. Call it the Steve Rogers School of Contemporary Feminist Thought. We'll be circling back to this too. Nick Fury. Fury's back in an actual real role as an actual real character. He's a pencil pusher at S.H.I.E.L.D. who kinda happens onto the case when Carol crashes out of the sky. He ends up working with her to look for the Lightspeed engine MacGuffin and to help the Skrull refugees get to safety. And we finally learn where he got his eye patch finally. Jude Law. I'm going to be honest with you, I just watched this movie twice and I can't remember any of the Kree names. Anyway, Jude Law is the one who kidnaps Carol in the first place, then raises her like a sister or possible mistress to be the best version of herself, whatever that means. He's Gaslight Man. Friend Lady. Carol reunites with her friend, who was also in Air Force with her and has thought she was dead for the last 6 years. She also has a name, which I also can't remember. She helps Carol fight the Kree as well, finally getting to fly a real combat mission after all. They also have a Bechdel-approved conversation about filling in Carol's backstory and supporting each other and stuff. Yay, feminism! She's also MCU's 8th black or brown sidekick. Marvel. Marvel is a Kree pretending to be a human on Earth working to develop a light-speed engine specifically for the purpose of helping the Skrulls get far away from the Kree. She is Carol's mentor and also the form the Kree AI leader takes in her head, and also the namesake of the movie, a thing which obviously makes a lot of sense. We also have other Kree stereotype fighters including Tomboy, Black Guy, Other Black Guy, and Large Bearded Guy, various Skrulls whose names I can also not remember, and the triumphant return of Agent Guy as the world's oldest 25-year-old man.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
This is a pretty typical Marvel outing in that the only character who really develops is Carol, the protagonist. I guess Nick Fury goes from not believing in aliens to believing in aliens, but that doesn't really count and happens immediately, so let's talk about Carol. When we meet her, Carol has been living as a Kree for 6 years, believing herself to be one even though she can't remember anything that happened before, and all the Krees have blue skin except her and Jude Law for some reason. She also has photon powers in her hands, the presence of which is never explained to her. Fortunately, she never thinks to ask, so that's good. She spends her time training with Jude Law, who instructs her to not be so emotional and stuff in order to become the best version of herself, a thing which neither of them define. To its credit, the film does a good job throughout of portraying and sticking to Carol's point of view. As audience members, we never know things that she doesn't know, which means we discover things about her as she does, a la Jason Bourne. The film does interesting things with how it portrays her memories, and Carol's confusion about them is a primary driver of the plot, a la Jason Bourne. In this sense, Captain Marvel is one of the better told movies in MCU. The whole finding identity angle is something MCU hasn't really tapped so far.
Who am I? What am I?
Usually an origin story like this would be about Carol discovering and controlling her powers. Instead, it's about her discovering herself, which should be fine, except that what we discover is that she's the worst. This is where it might be helpful to speculate about what the movie might have wanted to be. In the beginning, Carol is living a lie told to her in order to control and limit her. She is made to constantly prove her worth and right to take up space in the world. As she learns the truth about herself and her situation, though, she is able to overcome those limitations and live for herself. She doesn't need to prove anything. She is her own person. And she uses her newfound agency to be a hero for other people. Nice, right? A great way for Carol to seize autonomy, particularly as a female character in a highly male-coded story world. But, sadly, that's not the movie we actually get. The movie we get starts the same. Carol is a blind puppet being controlled by forces she doesn't know about. What she does know is that she wants to prove herself, but it's pretty clear from the outset that this has to do more with satisfying her ego than, as the movie says, for the good of all Kree. When she loses a sparring match with Jude Law, she blasts him with her photon rays just so she can prove that technically she could still have the upper hand if only she didn't have to abide by his stupid rules. Then she convinces him that she should be the centerpiece of a risky plan, even though it is her first combat mission, which leads to her being captured by the enemy. Obviously, this enemy turns out to be the good guys, but we don't know that yet, so it's framed as a mistake. From there on out, the plot is driven by Carol's desire to learn the truth about herself rather than to get herself and all the sensitive information she apparently has in her head back to the people she believes to be the good guys. This could be an understandable and not particularly ego-y act, but she instead approaches everything with an incredible amount of entitlement. Simply because these things involve her, it is her right to investigate them and put any number of people at risk in the process, people which are inferior to her because of her great power. And once she knows everything and finally has access to her full powers, her ego compels her to basically take charge of the Skrull rescue to make herself feel better for all the gleeful murder she did at the beginning of the movie.
I'm the captain now.
Never mind that she has never done anything like that before, and now knows she has a compromised understanding of reality, making her maybe not the best leader in this situation.
Who am I? What?
In the end, she tells Jude Law that she has nothing to prove to him, not simply because she knows he was gaslighting her and understands that her self-worth is not tied to him in any way. She says it because she knows she is far more powerful than he is, and that nothing he can do will affect her. Then she flies off on a space adventure, leaving her best friend and only family behind again, never to return for the next 25 years. You know, like a hero.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
I brought up the other Marvel captain before, Steve Rogers. Steve and Carol are really quite similar, and I think looking at their similarities is pretty instructive. For example, They both spent their childhoods being told they couldn't do things because they were too small and or girly. They both enlist in the military because they have massive chips on their shoulders and things to prove, and both have a hard time there because they are too small and or girly. They receive special treatment by superior officers due to their gumption and are given special opportunities as a result. They are both recipients of massive powers which they decide to use to prosecute their own agendas rather than work within the systems for which they voluntarily volunteered. They both hate being told what to do and resent any type of authority, considering themselves morally superior to everyone they meet and therefore in a position to tell them what to do. They are both hot and blonde. Ultimately, they both share the same moral blind spot. That is, they both inherently believe that because they want to or can do a thing, that it is the right thing. They view themselves as being above the societies they are a part of and therefore are not accountable to those societies for anything they do. Carol Danvers, to be fair, is so far way less problematic than Steve Rogers, largely because she has some extenuating circumstances which excuse a lot of her behavior, namely the amnesia and thinking she is a space alien. We simply can't judge her like a normal person. The trouble for me comes after she learns that she is not a space alien, but actually just a regular Earth human. She wants to help the Skrulls, which is good, especially after she murdered a bunch of them. She also wants to not be a Kree anymore, which is characterized as being good, though it's kind of making the judgment that all Kree are equally culpable in the Skrull genocide and are therefore all evil. But she also apparently doesn't want to be a human, the thing she actually is. She decides to just be an entity of one, a choice she can only make since she can fly around space with her photon beams and is basically invincible. She does this so she can help relocate the Skrulls, but then also go destroy the leader of the Kree, a thing which will surely pitch their collectivist society into chaos, resulting in the suffering of a lot of innocent people who didn't actually, do the genocide. It may also cause them to retaliate against Earth since, she's an Earth human. It also leaves her friend, who is characterized as essentially her only family, holding the bag again on Earth by herself. That's what friends are for. Someday. The thing that never crosses her mind even for a second is to be with her friend who clearly wants her around and helping her actual species now that they are potentially implicated in an intergalactic conflict with a vastly technologically superior race as a direct result of her ego-driven actions. But whatever, space adventures are good too. Photon flying is fun. As always, all of these actions are not problems in and of themselves. Characters get to do what they want, including bad or dumb things, and not have the story suffer. The problem, as is almost always the case with MCU, is framing. Carol's actions, which are pretty problematic, are framed in the movie as being only heroic and empowering, and therefore good. I don't need to prove myself is conflated with I am better than you because I am more powerful than you, and therefore comes off as everything I want to do is right, and since you can't physically stop me, I am going to do it without consulting anyone. We are meant to cheer for her going off to be the lone free ranger or whatever, but it's not really any different from Steve Rogers deciding to go be a terrorist rather than bind himself to the law.
Here he goes off to his room to write that hit song, Alone in My Principles.
Obviously, this entirely undercuts the whole theme of the movie, that a person's worth does not come from the perceptions of others, but from within. Carol measures her worth by her independence, or by how much others can't influence her. Like a hero. There is a simple way around this issue. Carol Danvers, like Steve Rogers probably should have been, could be a complicated anti-hero instead of a full-blown regular hero. For example, the conclusion she reaches after all her many years of striving to be good enough for other people who are never going to let her be what she wants could be, you know what? I don't need any of you anymore. Peace. And then she goes off to do her own thing unapologetically. It's selfish, but if the movie is aware of it, it can make something thematic out of it. Her character is then set to continue to grow and develop, perhaps eventually pulling a Tony Stark and becoming relatively unselfish. It wouldn't even conflict with the movie's ham-fisted feminism. There's a long and glorious tradition of let-it-burn type feminist stories. But something like that might make the boys angry, so it's probably better to just do the lazy thing and have Carol be inadvertently terrible while she does cool-looking things. See, the way to make an impactful feminist statement is not to do something original or bold, it's to just do the thing that makes everyone the least uncomfortable. Marvel loves women. I usually do a list of assorted story issues at the end of the video, but there were so many this time I thought we should probably do some of them here. Basically, nothing anybody does in this movie makes any sense, which means there's no tension, which means it's incredibly dull despite all the kick punching. I've broken it down by race so we can keep track of it more easily. The Kree. 1. Why are the Kree fighting the Skrulls? It is abundantly clear that the Skrulls pose no actual military threat, either now or at any time in the past, seeing as how they are basically refugees scattered around the galaxy with minimal weapons. It is also clear that they have no resources of any value, so colonizing them or wiping them out has no measurable benefit for the Kree. They are spending massive resources of their own pursuing an enemy that is not actually a threat and whose defeat will not benefit them. Why can't they just be regular old expansionists and colonize planets like Rome conquered Germanic tribes, just for the fun of it? 2. The Kree kidnap Carol so they can, use her absorbed photon powers to build a lightspeed engine or something, apparently believing she is the only link to Mar-Vell's research. So, if they need her so badly, then why on earth did they put her into an elite military strike force where she could very easily be killed or captured, like exactly what happens in the movie? Why not put her in a lab, or a jail, for that matter, or keep her in some kind of stasis while she's being studied? 3. The Kree leader is described as being like an AI system, which is essentially worshipped as a god. But AI has to be made. That's what artificial means. So at some point did the Kree just make their god leader and everyone decided to follow what it says, like it's Moses coming down with the 10 Commandments?
What's normal to him amazes us.
He will be our new god.
Oh, I get. Maybe the Kree are just supposed to be dumb. The Skrulls. 1. The Skrulls seek out Carol in part to find the energy source they need for a lightspeed engine, which they need to take them across the galaxy and out of reach of the Kree. This was Mar-Vell's entire mission, but this movie also features jump points, areas in space that are basically like wormholes, enabling super quick intergalactic travel to what seems like pretty much anywhere. Jude Law is able to make it to Earth from whatever system he's in 24 hours. The Skrulls are also able to arrive there very quickly after kidnapping Carol. For comparison, the nearest star to Earth is 4 light years away, meaning that a ship with a light-speed engine could take 4 years to get there, making it approximately 38,000 times slower than a regular ship using jumps. So I guess my question is, why would having a light-speed engine be any sort of advantage in this universe, and why is having one still the Skrulls' one shot at survival, given that they already possess jump-capable ships? 2. The Skrulls' plan is to use the lightspeed engine to take them across the galaxy to safety, and Carol decides to go with them to help them find a suitable place. Which is to say, neither they nor Mar-Vell had a plan of where that might be. I just hope they find it, I guess. 3. In a galaxy with many jump points that make even the most remote planet accessible, as we see in Guardians 2 when Rocket is able to get to Ego in a few hours, where exactly do the Skrulls think they can go that will be out of reach of the Kree? I don't know, maybe there are places that don't have close jump points and they'll jump to the furthest jump point away from the Kree and then travel at light speed for possibly many years or decades before arriving at a habitable system. Good plan, guys. Oh, I get it. Maybe the Skrulls are just supposed to be dumb too. The humans. 1. Mar-Vell was using the blue Tesseract cube to develop a lightspeed engine in some kind of secret government lab on Earth. But S.H.I.E.L.D., who had possession of the blue cube and were also kind of Hydra at the time, did not know of this? Strikes me as improbable, but whatever. 2. Carol gives Fury an intergalactic pager, which she tells him to use only in an emergency. These are things which Nick Fury did not feel were emergencies. An alien invasion in New York featuring giant armored flying centipedes in a giant space wormhole. An alien invasion in London featuring a giant spaceship, gravitational anomalies, and the possible undoing of all matter as we know it. An alien invasion in Hong Kong featuring a giant purple space head that destroys time or happiness or whatever, I can't remember. Another alien invasion in New York featuring giant space donuts, specifically foretelling the impending arrival of Gozer the Destructor, who is coming to seize Xfinity Stones, several of which you know where they are. An alien invasion in Wakanda featuring dozens of giant space landing craft and millions of space soldiers. Obviously, most of these happened pretty quickly, so Carol wouldn't have been an effective asset in the fighting, but wouldn't you want someone who I don't know, could easily traverse the cosmos and just check and see if there was more trouble brewing or something. Not to be a backseat driver, but Fury's got a lot higher of an emergency threshold than I do. Oh, I guess it could be that the movie is just poorly written and there's no actual plan for the series. Carol Danvers. It's not so much what Carol does that makes no sense as what she can do. 1. Carol gets photon powers from, absorbing energy when the Lightspeed engine reactor explodes. Fine. My question is, what exactly do the photon powers do?
Excuse me, darling. What is it exactly that you do?
Do they produce heat? Or force? Or both? Or something else? When she hits a body with them, the person gets knocked back, but she can make molten holes in metal, including doors and giant spaceships. Also, she is apparently made much stronger and also becomes immune to the effects of outer space, but can be contained by electrical things. So once again, what are her powers and what can they do and not do? Because right now the answer is basically anything, which is stupid. 2. Are Carol's photon powers infinite? Can she run out? Or get tired? Or does she just have, an infinite ammo cheat code? I'm just saying, whenever you have a character with what is functionally infinite power, it's really hard to make the story around them since nothing is challenging and therefore there's no tension. But whatever, we can just be lazy with this, that's fine. 3. Actually, I do have a question about what Carol does. At the end of the movie, she destroys one of the Kree bomber ships, but leaves the others to go home. For no apparent reason. Tactically, this feels unwise, but she also doesn't show, any remorse or pity. Actually, I figured it out. It's just ego. It'll be more satisfying to her if she gives the Kree tons of fair warning because she feels like it's not a contest for her anyway. Yay, heroes! What I'm saying is that even though 49 people worked on the script, including the directors, we still managed to somehow end up with a movie that feels like it's being improvised in real time. Which is what you want in the origin story of your movie series' most powerful hero. Just Apatow it. It's fine. Alright kids, it's time to talk about everyone's favorite topic. Contemporary pop feminism. The term feminism covers many different things. For example, it might refer to types of political and social activism, movements in art, film, and literature, branches of philosophy, and schools of critical thought springing up around these phenomena. Broadly speaking, feminism looks at the ways gender impacts and is impacted by society. Historically, it has focused on how societal power structures, typically patriarchal in nature, work to suppress the people, female or otherwise, over whom they wield influence, and how those power structures might be changed or dismantled in favor of something more equitable. In politics, this work might be done by advocating for women's rights and equality measures. In sociology, by understanding cultural nuances around things like marriage, labor, and childbearing. In art, including movies, often it manifests as reclaiming or reframing narratives from which female perspectives have typically been excluded, or presenting alternatives to the current cultural status quo. Which brings us to the reactivist pop feminism of the contemporary Disney blockbuster, which is a thing all its own. I'm not going to get too deep here. Honestly, there's a lot of great stuff out there about this topic already, but modern Disney movies all kind of have the same pseudo-feminist tropes they like to use. These are: a spunky, sassy heroine who is smarter than everyone around her, does not get involved romantically with anyone because romance is a crutch, and ultimately has everything she needs to be successful already inside her, no real growth necessary. People naysay or ridicule her abilities and how she doesn't quite fit in society, then see how wrong they are when she is able to go be successful on her own terms. There is also an explicit or implicit criticism of the genre in which the movie takes place, and potentially of Disney itself, so that the corporation can come off as being hip with the youths of today, without actually having to do, any difficult narrative work. Now, is there a problem making stories wherein little girls can see heroines solving problems and toughing it out to reach their goals? Of course not. But does doing so mean the movie is actually any good or bringing anything fresh or thought-provoking to the cultural table? Not necessarily. And unfortunately, Captain Marvel falls right in line with the most mediocre of these movies. Carol Danvers is what we call a Mary Sue, a character who was from the start incredibly gifted and talented. one who does not really need to develop their abilities in order to be successful. This is often an explicitly sexist pejorative term used by trolls when a movie has a girl character who's not there for sex, even though movies and comics are replete with male Mary Sues. And a Mary Sue isn't bad on its own. Let's face it, there's a pleasure in watching a powerful protagonist wipe the floor with enemies. The trouble, of course, is that it's hard to develop a character who is already at the top, meaning that very often stories centered on Mary Sues are kind of dull. This is a risk that the lazy pop feminism of Disney engages in wanting to show a strong female protagonist. Often these movies end up shortchanging the development of those characters, making them in fact very boring, unrelatable, and unable to support the stories around them, which is exactly what happens in Captain Marvel. Rather than a story that engages in the nuances of a patriarchy that is supposedly supportive of women, but actually uses that support as another means of control, the movie can't go any deeper than a "Nevertheless She Persisted" t-shirt. Inspirational for little girls? Sure. But a far cry from the revolutionary feminist manifesto we were promised. Because that's the other thing with Disney feminism. In playing so safe with its feminist themes in the actual movie, but making such a big self-aware deal about them in marketing, just turns into pandering.
They figured out the words and the phrases they can use to pander to their audience, and they list the same words and phrases off sort of Mad Lib style in every song. Its
feminism is just another way to get butts in seats, which of course is par for the course for Disney. For example, they will run all kinds of articles celebrating how gay the new Star Wars will be, and then the actual movie comes out and it's an ambiguous moment that can be cut from the Chinese release and lasts half a second anyway.
Hear that subtle mandolin? That's textbook pandering.
Or, to keep this discussion on Captain Marvel, they'll cast Brie Larson and make a huge deal about how this is the first MCU movie about a lady hero and hire lady director, and then the movie is just about not quitting, especially once you have godlike powers you didn't do anything to develop and abandon your friends to go start a war for 25 years. This movie's doing just as much to gaslight us as Jude Law does to Carol. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this. Is it really so terrible to have a movie that doesn't really do anything more than indulge in a little escapist power fantasy? Isn't that what superheroes were invented for anyway? I think that continues to be a major part of why these stories keep finding audiences. There is a pleasure in seeing powerful good guys fight and defeat bad guys. And it's even better if you feel like you can relate to those powerful good guys and see yourself in them. So what if the Captain Marvel movie is mediocre by any narrative measure? If it means there's a hero out there that kids who felt left out before can now relate to, hasn't it done its job? Well, yeah. I mean, it would probably be better if she also communicated something valuable those kids might actually use in their lives, or that might have any impact on the cultural conversation. Spider-Man gave us that sage lesson: with great power comes great responsibility. All Captain Marvel gives us is, great power means you can do whatever you want. Which is maybe a message that could use a little bit of refining, don't you think? Nah, that's just the patriarchy talking. Marvel loves women. Here's my other list of stuff we need to mention about Captain Marvel. 1. I mentioned it already, but why is this movie called Captain Marvel? The character Marvel is not the protagonist or even a main character, nor was her name Marvel, nor is she a captain. Carol looks up to her, but doesn't take on her persona or anything. I guess at the end she commits to finishing her work, but that doesn't quite get us there either. If anything, it should be called Captain Avenger, which, unlike Captain Marvel, doesn't sound silly at all. 2. Carol is fitted with some kind of inhibitor thing on her neck, which drastically limits the strength of her photon powers. For some reason. This device is never explained to us, specifically how it works and what Carol thinks it's for. Also, her photon powers can melt through spaceships. How on earth does this tiny neck chip turn them off completely? 3. I guess it doesn't matter because she can just turn it off with her mind and pull it out. Good thing it wasn't connected to her brain and pulling it out didn't cause major brain trauma or something. 4. Good thing Earth years and Kree years are exactly the same. Or maybe the universal translator, which also apparently causes everyone's actual mouth movements and produced sounds to change, converts units of measurement as well. Or it could be lazy storytelling, take your pick. 5. Hope none of the Skrulls Carol murdered on their ship had family members on the Earth satellite, because that would be awkward. Oh, who's this? This is Carol. She's going to help us with the Lightspeed engine. But also she murdered your husband by launching him out into space last night. She's real sorry. 6. At the end of the movie, we see Fury get the first idea for what will become the Avenger Initiative. Then it's only 13 more years before he goes to recruit Tony Stark. Like, what were you doing that whole time, man? Good thing everyone in the galaxy waited till after that to start their evil plans. 7. At the end of the movie, we also see Carol join what's left of the Avengers after Fury summoned her before getting Thanos. This is presumably 2018 or 2019, nearly 25 years after the end of Captain Marvel. So, shouldn't Carol be like 60 by now? And not Brie Larson's age? I don't know, maybe you age different in space. But also it doesn't get much lazier than forgetting whether your character is young or elderly. Anyway, at least now there's someone who it's only moderately creepy for Steve Rogers to date. Only 30 years apart. 8. We've mentioned it already, but seriously, why doesn't Carol ever come back to Earth? I get wanting to go help settle the Skrulls, but surely after a few months of that you could at least drop a note. There's no reason she couldn't pop in for a visit once in a while, or even return to live full time as she keeps working on sorting herself out and starting wars and stuff. Oh wait, the reason is you locked yourself into a narrative timeline with the movie series and had never planned on including Captain Marvel until Wonder Woman did crazy good at the box office, and then you wanted to have it be a 90s movie for some reason, so... whatever, she doesn't come back. That'll cover why she wasn't around doing all of Earth's worst problems. 9. In Carol's confrontation with the AI god at the end, they get into like an energy battle, but all of this is in Carol's mind, so what does the AI god shoot at her? Like mind electricity? Also not sure how turning off an imaginary photon inhibitor neck chip in her mind translates to a real one in real life. Well, it's symbolic, man. She's casting off the bonds of the patriarchy and reaching her full potential. Doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense in practical terms. Don't you understand feminism? And I think that's it. At the end of the day, Captain Marvel is not the best Marvel movie, but it is also far from the worst. I would say it's more disappointing than anything else. It's one of the ones you actually want to kind of get behind. And since on the surface it looks and feels different, since it's a lady instead of an interchangeable man, it kind of tricks you into thinking it is different.
Anything different is good.
But then you realize that, apart from being a lady, Carol isn't really any different from any other MCU protagonist, and the movie that no doubt started off with a bunch of talented people wanting to make something meaningful got watered down by Uncle Kevy and Disney to a lowest comedy nominator this won't offend Chinese censors or Sean Hannity lump of nothing. Because Marvel loves women. Anyway, that'll do it for me on this one, but don't forget to mark your calendars, folks, because next up we've got the big one. The grand finale epic conclusion of the Infinity Saga Avengers Endgame, which is definitely not a movie that just spends 3 hours hitting Control-Z over and over until it becomes the worst possible version of itself. Good night.
Wow, Poochie came from another planet? I guess.
Who am I? What am I?